All right. Hey, everyone. All right. Let me just change into speaker view here. Okay, great. Good to be with you all today. So this is a meeting on the moon and her nodes. What I want to do in this class is first speak about just the evolutionary astrology perspective of the moon, what it's all about, what does the moon function in our own natal charts, and then really give perspective for the moon's inherent relationship to its own nodes. We oftentimes, oh, okay, Peggy just responded, she's not my mother. Okay, well, that's hello. But she's old enough to be. Okay, so we often get stuck in looking at the nodes, and Pluto and the nodes is a basic EA skeleton process, and yet there are no nodes without the moon. So in a way, it's missing a very fundamental piece, a piece about our own soul, a piece about our own journey, to not really understand what the moon's all about in our chart. And we ask the question, why this moon? Why have we manifested this moon? What's really interesting is your moon is also going to be connected to the sun. Like when you start looking at the moon, you're looking at the sun because the moon has a phase. And that phase is determined by its relationship to the sun. And so there's no really deeper understanding of the nodes without the moon. And there's no really deeper understanding of the moon without also acknowledging its relationship to the sun. A full moon is different than a new moon, is different than a quarter moon. So these are all things that I like to offer some perspective for. And then as we go along, please feel free to jump in with any questions on the chat box. So first, just to give a little introduction, I'm in my van right now. I have a third house moon. I live in a vehicle. And you might slightly see and hear some trucks passing by me as well, relative to where I'm currently parked. When we look at the moon on the most basic level, we're looking at the very obvious experience of being in a human body. I was thinking of calling this talk also, so you incarnated as a human. When the child is born, when the baby is born, its instinct is to reach for the breasts. There's an inherent relationship within the biological being that the soul manifests as to live, to be nurtured, to survive. And it's not just a Taurus, Venus, second house kind of survival. It's, I need to belong here. Inherently, like there's no asking permission, there's no construct around it. It's like an instinct for belonging. I'm born and I expect there's someone there with me. Just think about that conceptually. It's like, yeah, no one's born without some kind of body there with them. You're not born out of nothing. So being born from a mother, being born from a womb, and the nourishment of a human body, that comes inherently with a package. And when we look at the soul's journey, and we offer a soul level perspective to it, we acknowledge an expression of the soul's consciousness, that the soul is the program for this entire incarnation. And it starts off in this okay, I don't know why that happened. Hopefully that won't happen again. But the words that I was speaking was, we start off in this completely vulnerable experience. And what happens with the moon is we're looking at how the soul basically necessarily needs a quality of continuity and stability and security for itself. We have to know that we belong. And if we really get in touch with that moon energy, it's a completely emotional experience. And to understand what an emotional experience is versus an intellectual experience, whatever, the emotional experience is this feeling of landed. It's a feeling of I'm at home, I'm comfortable. And that's different for everyone. But what's universal for all humans, and in fact for all species, is there's no functioning. There's no operating, there's no being healthy without the inner experience of belonging on the most basic emotional level. I'm cared for, I am held. Now, as we mature, we develop more self-reliance, we develop more stability, we mature our ego structure, our identity in the world. Yet that same need for a womb never goes away. Its form will change, right? We won't need to be held so often or breastfeed or whatever it might be. We're not going to be babies anymore. But there is literally no incarnating without the need every moment to have a sense of ground in home, to be grounded in a deeper sense of belonging. And so throughout our entire life, even as we mature, there's this profound intimate process, and I consider the moon to reflect self-intimacy, for us to know how to hold ourselves, how to care for ourselves. Otherwise, we literally can't evolve. And this is often a situation when we have in a chart, we'll look at a couple different charts, but when we have strong karmic situations with the moon, oftentimes what's happened is either there's repression or trauma or something that led to an emotional stunting where a part of you was left, when you're 7 years old. And so the rest you didn't develop emotionally, and yet you're still functioning in the world, doing your thing, getting a job, becoming spiritual, whatever it might be. And yet without a fully integrated emotional body at the fundamental, most subjective, non-intellectual, not higher self, upper chakra level, but like core, doesn't matter how much you evolve, at the most basic subjective level of your human beingness, there's something calling to your attention. So with the moon, we learn how to evolve and navigate in this world with a ground in this present moment, feeling into, being present with what's needed now. How do I care for this being now? And the healthy emotional development relative to the moon is the ability to, and you see this with children, the ability to really connect with what at this juncture in my life do I need to feel safe and secure, right? If you might have a memory of yourself at a certain point, realizing, I don't need that blanket anymore. I don't want to sleep with my teddy bears anymore. And this could happen in a very natural way where a child realizes on their own, I don't need that. And so what was necessary for continuity and security, we grow out of. But we never grow out of it and then are like, cool, I don't have any needs anymore. To be in touch with our moon is so important. And I speak so strongly about this, probably because it's so misunderstood. Like the lunar dimension, not just in astrology, but in life, in patriarchy. Integrating our human lives, our spiritual lives, with respect to a healthy lunar development is really glossed over. The bed you sleep in, the food you eat, how you make your food, the environment you come home to, putting intentionality and care into that. It's different for everyone. I'm living in a van. That's perfect for me right now. It's a part of my journey. I think I'll share my chart in a moment. But to neglect that need for self-intimacy which also implies, sleep. How often babies, there's a sense of timelessness in the moon, not timelessness in terms of Neptune, but timelessness in terms of its opposite Saturn, its opposite Capricorn. You're not thinking about responsibilities of who you have to be in the world. When we're in the moon world, we're held, we're contained. We're not needing to control. We're not needing to be someone. We're not needing to be socialized. So to have that completely in space, to be held, to relax, and to rest even. Now, when we tune into the evolutionary astrology world, we're going to ask, why did any particular moon sign manifest in any chart? Why the hell would anyone pick a Scorpio moon? Why would anyone want to do that? Right? Logically, and I'm just being slightly humorous, Taurus moon sounds ideal. Stable, it's grounding, it's sensual, it's here on the earth. So obviously I'm joking, but we could have all kinds of moon signatures. Some are laden with crisis and trauma and difficulty, others are not. In everyone's chart, not all charts are created equal. Not all lifetimes, not all intentions for every lifetime is created equal. So we want to understand, what does this lunar signature reflect relative to this soul's ongoing evolutionary journey? And I'll start off with an analogy that Linda reminded me of, and I spoke about this in my ebook that I wrote some years ago. And this is a way to introduce the basic relationship between the moon and her nodes. The south node is the moon on a more meta level. It's the pattern of homemaking. It's how you have come to become intimate with yourself. It reflects the archetype of your past lifetimes, who you have been. And if we want to ask, why have you been that, we look towards the soul. Pluto, what is your evolutionary intention? What's birthed you into each and every incarnation? Pluto, Scorpio, aspects to Pluto, all of that. The south node of the moon is, okay, well, to do this evolutionary work, I'm going to have to manifest in a human form, in a human body, with a story of myself. This is the kind of self-identity that I'm going to play out and experience. So then we incarnate into a new life. Then we have our moon. The moon is this present moment, moment to moment to moment to moment. And the analogy that I like to use, think of the south node as a land that we're coming from, right? So it's who we've been, our culture, our language, our familiar way of being. The moon now is this very current moment to moment experience of, here I am, this amorphous being with an emotional memory of the past, with a sense of evolutionary trajectory, which is the north node, which also means each lifetime has its own purpose. There's an evolutionary potential and trajectory built into the framework of every single lifetime that the soul comes into. So I'm going somewhere. There's an unfolding path here. But who am I right now? Now, we can think of this as the teddy bear that the soul is holding on to as it's traversing this journey from the past, the known to the unknown, past to the future. This teddy bear isn't real, just like none of this was real. There's no animation to it. If we look at any identity structure, it's actually just an identity structure. We'll get more to that in a moment, but that's not the point. The teddy bear says, I feel safe now in this imagining of reality. I feel safe in this context, knowing that I have something warm and cozy to hold on to. It elicits a sense of emotional continuity and security for oneself. Now, that teddy bear can be the moon in any sign, right? It can literally be a teddy bear, and let's go back to the Taurus moon, really soft, wonderful, velvety teddy bear made out of chocolate and satin sheets and good sex. Or it can be a Scorpio teddy bear, which will say emotional depth and really meaningful connection, passionate intimacy, great presence, binding relationships with others. Or it can be a Leo teddy bear, which basically means play, being appreciated, being seen, feeling a sense of aliveness and respect for one's life. And by rooting ourselves in that lunar energy, we become healthy, we become stable, we become secure. And there's going to be work with that. I mean, raise your hand if your childhood was like without any kind of trauma or crisis or confusion, whatever. Everyone's had difficulties on some level. And so the moon, interesting way of thinking of it, it literally creates, I want to say the word limitation, but it creates a filter which serves as a sort of limitation that basically says you are not going to evolve faster than you can work on your emotional issues. And say that differently, you have to become whole and integrated emotionally. Otherwise, you can't do what you've come here to do. So again, we look at this moon and we will determine what is the human being path that we are walking now. It's interesting, in more mainstream astrology, we'll have this, the drop in towards your sun, moon, and rising. And then we get to evolutionary astrology, we're kind of getting to the core of it. Like, all right, great, what's your soul journey? And evolutionary astrology addresses the whole chart. And Jeff Green's teachings about the moon, to me, are brilliant and so fundamental. And yet it's so easy, even as an astrologer looking at other people's charts, it's very easy to miss that we're talking to the moon and that we are talking to this ego structure that will not be able to take in and integrate what they're not able to take in and integrate. And we need to respect that. Talk to the ego. Don't talk beyond the ego. Address the soul, but work within the parameters of the conscious human ego, the conscious identity, because whether we like it or not, nothing's getting in beyond the ego structure, the conscious identity structure. So now what I want to do is tune into how can we understand the moon in its relationship to the south node? Every planet and its nodes has an inherent relationship. Two things that I want to say here. One, we know the south node speaks to the past. It's where we're coming from. It's our identity prior to this lifetime. And thus, there is that emotional memory of being that. We gravitate. We are familiar with that. We know the north node reflects the evolutionary direction of this life. It's where we're going, in a sense. And also the nodes can also both speak to past life. Sometimes the north node is a past life dynamic as well. There are several mitigating factors that can imply that. And we know in this lifetime that the personality that comes forth is such a significant degree connected to the south node. Point in case, you could have parents that raise their children in the same way, but all the children are so fundamentally different. Right? They carry forth these qualities, traits in unconscious, subconscious memories, unresolved samskaras, karmic dynamics, pieces that want to be unraveled and worked out, that have nothing to do with this lifetime. Most of this life has nothing to do with this life, which you could say every life has nothing to do with this life. This moment itself is sort of beyond past, time, and future. We come into each lifetime thinking and believing this is it, but it was never it. It's continuing and bringing forth what we've been resonating and vibrating. But any moment we look at ourselves, we realize, oh, all there is to my existence is a story, a sense of who I am, what I need to be here, what I want to take in and what I won't want to take in. And for the most of us, we hold that predominantly unconsciously. And we're playing out the south node identity structure. Two, The moon will also say so much about your early life imprinting. It can say something about your mother, how you were cared for or not cared for. What kind of emotional impact did you receive growing up? The moon has an implicit, meaning not a direct implication, but there's an implicit indication of our prior lifetimes. Simply, its relationship to the South Node means there's an implicit understanding that there is a reason for having created this particular lunar structure in this lifetime. What we want to do in order to understand this is really tune into what is the soul's evolutionary trajectory. South Node, ruler of the South Node, all relative to Pluto. What's the evolutionary intention? How has it been evolving before this lifetime? And then the moon, think about this. You don't just pick a random moon sign, like, okay, well, this lifetime, I'm going to choose a Sagittarius moon because that was a lot of Scorpio in the past. It's all a part of this profoundly super intelligent, really intimate process of soul evolution. And to understand why the moon, we have to have an intuitive grasp. So I'm going to take this now into some charts. I'm actually going to start by offering my chart. Okay. I always feel like my chart's a good example because it's easy to talk about. Look at my South Node. It's in Sagittarius in the 3rd house. And it's conjunct the Sun, it's conjunct Uranus, it's conjunct the IC, it's conjunct Jupiter. It's very Sag. I am very Sag. Where's Pluto? Pluto in Scorpio in the 2nd house. So this speaks to a soul journey of finding self-reliance, 2nd house within my soul, Scorpio. Finding self-awakening to self-stability, self-esteem, self-worth in the unchanging, which means I've walked many lifetimes in learning how to depend on myself, finding resourcefulness and self-reliance within myself. How have I done that? Well, as a traveler. South Node in Sag. In the 3rd house too. So through the mind, reading books, traveling to different places. And in all these situations, the question around survival and adaptation. How will I get what I need? So it might be sitting on the streets in India as an astrologer giving readings, right? Intuitive spiritual counsel on the street, Sagittarius in the 3rd house with Uranus there, astrology. I may have been a teacher in the past that was supported for doing what he did. Alone, this can basically say that I have an orientation towards a particular line of thinking, Sagittarius. Because Sagittarius is looking for the answers, the truth. It's very broad-minded. So I have gravitated towards wanting to find the underlying truth, the answer. But 3rd house, I've scattered myself. I've looked many, many different places. And I've put on many different hats. I've tried to be a lot of different truths. That answer right there, that teacher, that philosophy, that perspective. And I've gotten involved in all of these things, sometimes being a teacher within all of them. But what's my North Node say? Don't become too fixed, too dependent upon one perspective, one way of looking at things, because you're going to just continue to contradict and find that there are other ways of thinking. Gemini in the 9th house says, cultivate a spiritual practice that's kind of immersed in the duality of life itself. Let your life be your spirituality. Let the experience of just learning and experiencing and being here and being on this path and interacting with people that you never thought you would interact, in ways you never thought you would interact, having human experiences you never thought you would have, This, as opposed to that Sagittarius, what's the answer? It's letting the journey become the answer. Gemini, keeping an open mind. And the rulers of my nodes are in Sag in the 4th house. So it really speaks fundamentally to this journey of me coming home to myself in a completely new way. Not needing to define my identity according to a belief system, but learning a way of truth. Mercury, Jupiter in the 4th house with Neptune, that is universal, that can speak to the masses, isn't defined by one philosophy or approach. Mercury leading to that North node in the 9th house, that can really speak many different languages. It's non-denominational. It can be integrated. It's not just for astrologers. It's not just for the Jewish religion. It's not just for all the various sects and religious groups that I've been a part of in this lifetime and past. So it's dissolving all of the seeking and the looking and the need for the way into finding myself at home in the way, on the journey. And I can go on and on about that, but that's the essence of my nodal configuration. All relative to Pluto, it's finding self-reliance in my soul through my intuition, through my direct experience, operating from the emotional body and the intuitive body, 4th house Sagittarius, cultivating richer emotional connection, following that sense within myself to lead me down the path, as opposed to a very old karmic pattern of me, which is, what's the answer? What should I do? Where should I go? What should I think? Right? And that Jupiter, Mercury with Neptune fundamentally has had this fundamental fear of not knowing. Well, I don't know what to do. I don't know who I am. I don't know where to go. So let me adopt something, a culture, a belief, Sagittarius, that will fill that sense of not being something. Okay. Now, what's the moon all about? So why do I have a Scorpio moon in the 3rd house? Why would I do that? So there are a number of ways of tuning into this. And this is where the intuitive art comes in. And hopefully we can start to get a taste of this as I look at a couple more charts. And the first thing that I want to say is there's no technique per se, but we need to work with our understanding of the archetypes, of the symbols involved, and be able to feel into it. A part of why there's no direct technique for understanding why each person has their moon sign is because each lifetime is so profoundly different. So different one to the next. And the reasons for each soul creating the life that it came into, the reasons, the purpose, it can be so different. Not all lifetimes are created equally. It's very, very important to tune into that. And as we all awaken into the larger sense of reality, we develop a greater appreciation for that relative component of the soul's journey. That there's a very relative, specific quality to each person's journey. It's not all about spiritual awakening and you got to reach a certain point, or that you're here necessarily not to suffer. Or not. Everyone's journey has to be so different. Looking with compassion and our intuition, we can really grasp that. So in this case, we have the moon in Scorpio in the 3rd house. Let's look at what this is about. Scorpio in the 3rd house, as I mentioned earlier, every moon implies sun because every moon has a phase. So it's in the balsamic phase. It's just approaching the sun. It's 16 degrees away from the sun. In fact, I was born just a little over a day before an eclipse. It was a solar eclipse. The moon was blocking the sun on the south node. Let's consider that for a moment. Just before I was born, the moon was in Scorpio, opposing Chiron in the 9th house in Taurus, and just a day before a solar eclipse on the south node. Solar eclipse on the south node, it's a very powerful eclipse. It's basically purging a lot of karmic stuff. It's a lot. In Sagittarius, it's just like all of your answers, ideas, conceptions, beliefs, And Uranus is right there as well, purging trauma around exclusion, alienation, elitism, groups. It's just all this latent karmic Sagittarius energy of seeking, knowing. And what's the shadow of Sagittarius is I know. I have the answers. So there's something we could perhaps intuit from my chart. Just looking at the moon, identity structure, ego, dissolving, balsamic phase into the sun, just before an eclipse. And I'll get to the Scorpio part first, that perhaps in this lifetime, I am dissolving my very strong adherence to knowing. And you can see that South Node Uranus, South Node with the Sun and Uranus in Sag in the 3rd house. It's possible that in a past life, at some point, I may have developed a self-importance or a self-righteousness, believing that I know. And maybe I have been dishonest. There are indications in my chart that I have not been honest. Virgo ascendant square in the nodes, speaking to issues around integrity and self-accuracy, equaling guilt in this lifetime, a lot of it. So that moon dissolving into the sun is like, remember, think of moon as the baby, the ego, the vulnerable, delicate part of us. It's like, I don't know who I am, moon. What do I hold on to? If you manifest a lifetime with a balsamic moon, you don't know where to find at the core of your being. You don't know where you are. And that's something we can all access, because at the core of all of us, we can't find anything. But it's a specific intention for this lifetime in my own ego development to be dissolving my conscious structures of self. And it's in the 3rd house. In this case, relative to the Sag in the 3rd house, Scorpio in the 3rd is saying probe deeper. It's actually asking me to look at deeper emotional dimensions of my own being. Whereas a Sag can just kind of be out there expanding and in a way alienating itself from its own emotional body, because it's in the head, it's in the higher mind, looking, well, Uranus, higher mind, just looking for greater perspective. That Scorpio is taking me deep. It's actually focusing and narrowing my mind to catch up with my emotional body, so I can actually articulate what I feel, communicate with a deeper emotional intelligence and awareness of what's happening inside of me, to become more emotionally perceptive and penetrating. And that's ruled by Pluto in the 2nd house. And this speaks to me becoming more stable and grounded within my own self. This moon is opposite Chiron. I don't have the aspects listed here, but Chiron is forming a yod, 150 degrees to my Pluto Venus and 150 to my Mercury Neptune, to yod, to my core signatures, Pluto, Mercury, Neptune, Mercury ruling the North Node. That Chiron in Taurus in the 9th house is this idea of feeling wounded and inept or incapable, not grounded enough while I'm on the journey. A wounding in my own self-worth and self-esteem, deeming me not wise enough, not understanding enough, not capable enough, not knowing deeply enough. And that moon's right there opposite that. So this moon is this journey for me, necessarily so, of facing these deep emotions of abandonment, betrayal, need, passion, wanting, needing to connect with my emotional body, where clearly there's been a lot of moving out from it. So we can thus implicitly derive something from my moon relative to past lifetimes. Because again, we see these things I'm working with in this lifetime, but theoretically I could have chosen all kinds of different moons, but the fact that this is the moon that I chose means this is the one that's karmically relevant to where I left off. And this is an important point that I'm making here. We don't say that the moon is your past life identity structure, but in virtue of having the moon that you have, it implies implicitly that there is a relevance to karmically where you're coming from. Thus, there is some kind of process underway before this lifetime that is in fact relevant to your moon. So we can imply from my moon signature in past lifetimes that there have been unresolved issues around betrayal and abandonment and loss, Scorpio moon, that I have not yet resolved. That there are unresolved feelings in my emotional body that have been carried forth, leading to the manifestation of a Scorpio moon balsamic with the sun just before an eclipse. And I can tell you this is indeed, well, it's my intuitive understanding that it is so, but I can speak experientially, just my own experience of a Scorpio moon, and it's a Scorpio moon, so I'm not gonna take everything off for you guys here. But my whole life, that Scorpio moon has manifested as a deep, permeating need for sexual and emotional intensity. And that need has taken me very deeply into vulnerabilities, obsessions, passions, shadow places that I've had to deal with. And so that moon has become a filter of my reality, where there's like in the background that Scorpio sense of self that's basically, am I safe here? Am I wanted? Do I have the connection? The safe and wanted with Scorpio is, am I being met on a deep penetrating level? Am I going to be met at the core of my being? And if I don't meet that part of myself, I don't acknowledge that need within me for great depth of presence and commitment and presence for the greatest and deepest part of me, then there's going to be a part of me unintegrated. And so unraveling on my journey with the Scorpio moon is me realizing as I mature, like, wow, I got to build emotional trust with people. And relative to that Sagittarius South node, that's not interesting. You know, that has been a thing for me that I haven't wanted to do. It's been safer for me to be in the upper realm, traveling and free all the time. And that Scorpio moon says, well, for you to open up, you have to really trust someone. And third house, there's a lot for you to share. There are third house sounds, words, expressions, stories that want to be shared through you, but you can't just share them. There needs to be the right kind of environment for you to access these non-intellectual places inside of you that feel hurt, vulnerable, distrustful, jaded, and protected. Scorpio moon. Okay, so that's me sharing myself. Hopefully not too much. So that's what you get when you got that much Sagittarius. Ultimately, you're going to talk about your Scorpio moon, whether you like it or not. So, is someone saying something? I don't know.
I said it was perfect.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Wendy.
Yeah, and Ari Moshe, just letting you know that we have 20 minutes.
What? Okay. Okay. Well, sounds great. Let's look at Elvis.
You can have 25. Okay.
Okay. All right. So Elvis. We all know about Elvis to some degree. He was really famous, powerful sex symbol, musician, really revolutionized music and culture in the world, and sexuality, and really sexual liberation in many ways. So just look at his chart. South node in Leo in the 8th house. Okay, power symbol right there, Leo 8th house. The ruler of that is the sun, 2nd house Capricorn. Stable, grounded, self-reliant, mature, right? That's in combination with that Leo in the 8th house. This can be an energy of a soul that is sensual, confident, whole, and content within himself. All relative to Pluto in Cancer in the 8th, and with Series, we won't go too deeply into that, but it's obviously a deep, permeating level soul need. Here's that Cancer in the 8th house is like a Scorpio moon, but it's different because we're looking at Pluto, but same archetypes. Cancer in the 8th house is this permeating need for the feminine, right? For the yin. He wants to penetrate deeply into the womb of his own soul. And that can manifest as a sexual addiction, addiction to women, relative to that 8th house structure, he's powerful and famous and well-known and beautiful and attractive. And then that, you know, sensuality and that survival, there's a pattern for this soul, essentially, that Capricorn 2nd house, to kind of get weighted down in his physical reality, sexuality, substances, what works, and to kind of get stuck in that reality. But then there's like there's a non-evolution to it because he's not growing. That the North Node in Aquarius in the 2nd house, really on a basic perspective, says he was learning in this lifetime to liberate his own values, to find life within himself. Obviously, he did that to a significant degree. Uranus rules the North Node, and it actually squares the nodes. Uranus and Aries in the 5th house squares the nodes. So Aries in the 5th house, be a leader, performer, right? Initiating, starting something new. That Uranus became a social contagion. It became a movement. It became a collective symbol for a zeitgeist, for a theme within the collective consciousness. That's a Uranus thing. Squaring the nodes, we see that this Uranus has an unresolved dynamic where actually he's really, really, really wanting to break free and liberate and just be free and live his own life. Free up his energy, free up his values. He actually found himself performing the same routine over and over and over again. Capricorn 2nd house, it makes some money. Leo 8th house, people like it. He was almost possessed by the image that he created for himself. Now, let's look at his moon signature. This is a very interesting thing to look at. And again, this is a way of looking into the soul from the perspective of the conscious ego structure that the soul creates for itself. It's a very beautiful skill to be able to do that. Moon in Pisces in the 3rd house. I see there's chat happening. Okay, I'm gonna get to that chat in a moment. I just want to speak to this one. So, Moon in Pisces in the 3rd house. That moon is ruled by Neptune in Virgo in the 9th house. And that moon is in a a new phase semi-square. There are 8 phases of the moon. The new phase is 45 degrees from the full moon, from the new moon, from the moment the new moon happens until the first 45 degrees. From your point of view, it's like from here to here. That's the new phase. And his moon is literally, if you count 45 degrees, his moon is like at the very, very end of the new phase. And by the way, just the way my mind works, I don't like putting aspect lines in my charts. So my apologies if that's confusing for some people. But you can count. 17 degrees Capricorn plus 45 degrees is 2 degrees Pisces. So the new moon semi-square, it's just at the cusp of the crescent phase semi-square, meaning it's almost exactly, it's just short of 45 degrees, right? So that juncture, let's talk about that first. That particular juncture, the new phase semi-square just before the crescent, is actually a yang energy turning yin. It's a juncture where the soul is now limiting and narrowing a path that has actually been very masculine, very out there, going, doing, initiating new experiences. And it's slowing down. And it's becoming internal. What happens in the crescent phase, especially at that junction, just before we enter the crescent phase, is there's often the sense of, I don't know how to slow down. I don't know how to become more yin. How to internalize and feel my way through life now. When we go deeper into the crescent phase, we really cultivate ourselves. We become very self-sufficient and sensually awakened, sensually alive. We become hermit-like, more content in our own sphere. And there's a phase of development that happens in that introverted quality. Here, it's that juncture just before we enter that crescent phase, and it's in Pisces. one thing that Elvis was very interested in, interestingly enough, was researching different spiritual traditions. He was very fascinated with them. He actually resonated a lot with Hindu spiritual conceptions. And he would oftentimes see his pastor and say,
Okay, looks like Ari Moshe's got disconnected. Let's just wait to see if he comes back.
I'm back. I don't know how much of that was lost.
That's okay. Perhaps you could repeat the last few sentences.
Last few sentences? Okay, great.
Okay.
Well, I'm not sure how many sentences I spoke, but let me get the share going on again. At the core of his being, from within his own ego structure, he was basically trying to find himself. And actually, he only held a lot of contradictory third house Pisces views and ideas and conceptions about reality through the ideas that he assimilated in the books and the things that he heard and learned. And that Neptune in Virgo is in ninth is like permeating guilt of feeling spiritually inept, feeling spiritually missing the mark from who we should be and who we could be. And this moon is in a new phase with Saturn. Saturn's in Aquarius as well. And that Aquarius Saturn is ruled by that Uranus we spoke about, squaring the nodes. So this new phase of Saturn is a completely new journey in defining his own identity in the world. It's what, on one level, obviously he did what he needed to do, but the journey continues, and his own soul evolutionary journey is not to become fixed in just the Elvis identity structure. And this moon, Saturn, is, I need to spiritualize my identity. I need to find out who I am beyond what I've been. There's something else there. He wanted that. He even joined, he very sincerely, in my opinion, joined the army when he was younger because he wanted to serve. And he didn't want to be treated differently. Of course he was, because he's Elvis. But this moon piece is, I want to liberate, I want to move away from who I've known myself to be and find something else that I can't quite grasp, but actually brings me to this place of controllessness, letting go of control. So he would have a strong interest in spiritual ideas, in new ways of thinking that basically reflected to him the forgiveness, Pisces, that he doesn't have to be who he thought he needed to be. The danger of that for him, the scary piece of that for him, with that Aquarius Saturn is, it's so defined. Saturn, so defined. He risks not being accepted anymore. If he doesn't know how to talk and communicate and accept and fit in to the prevailing, and by the way, in my opinion, he was on the cusp of individuation, right? He was really wanting to go into some other realm. And interestingly enough, he was actually traditional to individuated phases. He was a very strong, he spoke out against like hallucinogens and psychedelics and things like that. And yet, of course, he died of legal drug overdose. So the fear of not belonging, of not being understood, interestingly enough, that Saturn Aquarius in the third house, he needs to fit in, needs to be understood relative to consensus stage. That's scary for him if suddenly he's dissolving into the unknown. But what this speaks to me relative to his soul's clear evolutionary trajectory, his ongoing journey, some way or another, is going to be about going deeper into the, I don't want to be someone. I want to let go of this defined, crystallized role that I've been. And relative to Pluto, he's going to be connecting much more deeply with a core permeating need for depth and intimacy and connection, security. And that moon says there has been this need for this soul in this lifetime to feel like he can let go and surrender. Okay. So I think I'll take some questions now. Hopefully that really is adequate to provide a basic context for understanding this sort of intuitive way of gestalting the moon in the context of the chart. Let me look at the questions that we got up here. You were talking about him talking to his pastor about Eastern beliefs. It's considered that he was exposing mob ties that he despised, and was, I don't know anything about that, so I can't really speak to it.
No,
Yeah.
that's not the question. Okay, the question, what would
okay.
your thoughts be on a balsamic moon?
There was another question someone wrote. I don't see it anymore.
Yeah, it's here. What would your thoughts be on a balsamic moon with a sun that is the skip step?
We'd have to look at the chart. I'm tempted, yeah. But I could edge on the answer of that by speaking a little bit to this dynamic. So there's several situations where the moon and or the sun, because again, there's really no moon without sun. So in a way you could have sun without moon, but there's no moon without sun. So there are certain special situations where the moon is directly involved with the nodal axis. That's a special situation, right? With Pluto or with the nodal axis, on the nodes or squaring the nodes. So in that situation, we have a particular context where in this lifetime, the intention is specifically either to resolve or integrate or continue with, or whatever it might be, a past life ego structure that still wants to play out in this lifetime for whatever reason. Right? So if you have the moon squaring nodes, there's an issue here with the emotional body and the self-identity, the self-image, where something was skipped over or missed, where the soul has to go back and integrate self-intimacy, moon, in this lifetime. They have to reintegrate the lunar function, and until they do, there can be this feeling of maybe functioning in the world. But you could be a spiritual teacher, you can be a CEO, you can be whatever, but without that integrated moon, there's going to come a point where on a purely non-intellectual level, the soul is going to be drawn to fully integrate whatever sign house aspects are involved with that moon in order for evolution to proceed. If the moon's on the south node, it can speak to, an identity structure that you've played out in the past that you are continuing with, or where there's unresolved karmic stuff around it that you need to relive and resolve. It could be a very positive thing, like coming into the same family, or creating a similar identity structure that's meant to continue in the work that you've done in the past. So I have a question here. I can ask a question with a context if there's time relating to your lunar signature mode if you want. But I think we have to close in. Yeah, sure. I mean, Barbara, you want to go for it? You want to unmute yourself? Go for it.
Yeah, sure. It's not that complicated. I love what you said about this ego structure can only take in and integrate a certain way according to the moon sign and placement. That made total sense to me, that it has to be a certain sign to kind of move forward in your evolution. So, and then you said the moon is karmically relevant to where you left off, and you gave this great example of your Scorpio moon, that you needed to go deeper emotionally in a certain way to move towards your north node. So can you look at the moon sign as sort of the filter being what's next in line to resolve, like to go towards the north node? I have a moon in Gemini, so could that be unresolved issues of integration? Just like you said, for Scorpio, it was unresolved issues of going a bit deeper, to feel yourself in a certain way.
It's not, I'm glad you asked that, because it's not necessarily unresolved issues by any means. Like, your moon does not necessarily say unresolved anything. Okay. In the more broader way, it'll say this is relevant for you and has an implicit connection to where you left off in the past. But to say it's unresolved, see, in my case, it's opposite Chiron in the 9th. Chiron forms a yoke to my nodal rulers and to Pluto, and it's balsamic before the south node solar eclipse. So there are certain implications there that we can intuit. All of those things combined. So yeah, we could have a lunar signature that is functioning very healthy, doing quite well. And we'd want to ask, great, why? Like, how is that relevant? Everything is relevant, whether it's challenging or not. So maybe I have 4 minutes. Maybe I can just quickly drop into one more quick chart example.
Ari, you can take an extra 5 minutes. That's fine.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, beautiful.
All right, I'm going to share the screen again. Share. Okay. Here's my man, Bernie Sanders. Now, his chart time is actually disputed. It's a secondhand source, so we're actually not going to focus so much on the birth time. I've yet to see any astrologers that have observed and correlated. You know, it's easy enough to find out whether this is an accurate birth time. You just look at events in his life, etc. But I just want to point out one basic dynamic. No matter what, on that day, the moon was in Aries. And no matter what, it was conjunct Mars. You know, either with a wider, 8-9 degree orb, or like right on it. One way or another, it was conjunct Mars. So I just want to provide a little perspective. I think this is a really fascinating example. Let's just keep it general. Pluto in Leo. To me, 9th house would make actually sense, but Pluto in Leo. So sole evolutionary intention to actualize a creative purpose in the world. Chiron's involved. We can, acknowledge that that's there. The sun rules that Leo, and the sun's actually on the North Node. North Node's in Virgo with Neptune. Neptune is a ruler of the South Node. South Node in Pisces with Neptune in Virgo speaks to a identity structure that has been about serving the masses, Pisces, through a Virgo path, right? Fixing and healing things. Again, to me, it would make a lot of sense that it's in the 10th house, given his orientation for improving the social system of the country of the United States. But that's yet to be seen, whether it's actually in the 10th house. It's on the North Node, meaning he has already gone in this direction in the past, and it rules the South Node. So clearly there's an indication here that there having been almost like a Christ-like martyrdom that's happened in the past. Jupiter is in Gemini, and it squares the nodes of the moon. And this speaks to this learning for this soul in this lifetime of being completely honest and using his mental faculties to serve a purpose, to adopt and adjust accordingly to what the needs are, according to what his soul is wanting to serve in the world. I can go more into that, but I'll just basically say that this nodal signature with that Jupiter, he also has Ceres as well, squaring the nodes, speaks to a very strong Neptune sun on the North Node, orientation towards service, towards doing something, and it's like Neptune, Virgo, Sun, it's like his on the North Node, it's go, go, go. Anything on the North Node is green light. Meaning you've done that already, you got to keep on doing it now. That Jupiter implies some unresolved stuff as well. The thing I want to focus here is the moon. The moon is, in this case, in Aries, conjunct Mars. It's in the full phase with the sun. Full phase is what comes after the full moon. And give or take, the moon was either just before the inconjunct, which is 150 degrees, or just after the inconjunct of 150 degrees, from 15 Virgo to the middle of Aries. The full phase inconjunct beautifully expresses obviously what his life is playing out. It's you're here to get involved in the world and society, and you just take it one step at a time and you see where it lands, you see where it goes. The challenge here with an Aries moon is this desire to do, to act, to perform. And what can we imply about this Aries moon structure? It's conjunct Mars retrograde, which is also in conjunct to the North Node. that Mars retrograde basically is like acting and then crisis, acting and then crisis, acting and then crisis. He's run for office so many times and lost. He's tried to get things to happen so many times that he's lost. And yet, larger view of the larger story, he's lost many battles, but he's winning the war, so to speak. And that Mars retrograde is him learning how to slow down and be strategic in his actions. This moon conjunct Mars in the full face of that sun and all that Virgo, to me implies that a strategy for this lifetime, for the ego structure that he chose, is one where he's actually learning how to consciously use his anger and his outrage, his oomph, to do something in a way that can actually produce tangible, practical, functional Virgo results. And it tells me specifically that that was the unresolved issue in the past, right? Having a moon Aries ego structure conjunct Mars, that's learning that full phase in conjunct learning of just do it one step at a time. It'll work out, but you can't control the process, or else it's all that Virgo, the Virgo sun, which has to go one step at a time. It implies that there is an implicit indication that before this lifetime, there is something in his way of being that warranted this need to become more strategic and embodied in his Aries energy. Having now an Aries emotional body structure, he has to get to know himself. He has to know how to evolve within the Aries domain. Otherwise, there's a chance here of just acting recklessly and stupidly and martyring himself because of it, right? Getting involved in things, and it's like that Jupiter can be biting off more than he can chew and getting, persecuted for that. Becoming the idea of scapegoat and martyrdom, Jupiter and then the Pisces is where those archetypes speak to. And then becoming a symbol for collective healing and things like that. So developing an emotional body within the realm of Aries here, to me, speaks of what's an Aries moon? What is the maturation of an Aries moon? You learn with an Aries moon that you're not going to get anywhere if you're reactive. Simple as that. When you're younger and you're an Aries moon, you can be full of reaction, full of rage, and it's not very productive. And one of his amazing skills is the way he channels his anger towards productive action and movement. He's not wasting it, and that's a matured Aries moon. A matured Aries, this anger, you have to be able to self-reflect with an Aries moon, so that you're not just acting upon impulses, but you're really listening to what's needed. That hug gesture with anything moon, what's needed here?
Okay, Ari Moshe, are you still there? Oh, good, you're still there.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Just lost the last maybe 20 seconds.
Totally, yeah.
Okay.
Just any moon structure is that self-hug, like what's needed, what's wanted, what am I going to do with what I'm feeling? All right, so that hopefully gives a little perspective and context for his moon. And I suppose we will end the meeting here. Yes, next time maybe two. See, I'm always hesitant to go more than 1 hour.
Why?
Why?
I don't know. I just am.
Oh, all right then. Well, I'll try.
It's the Virgo in me, right? Okay, but maybe that would be a good idea.
That would be great. That would be great.
Thank you all so much for joining me. This was a really fun and insightful talk for me as well. And much love to you all. Bye.
Oh, thank you so much, Ari Moshe. Would you all please thank Ari Moshe Wolfe, everyone?
Thank you, Ari. Thank you, Ari.
Thank you. Sorry, it was great.
Love you all. Thank you.
Love you. Bye.
Love you.
Very helpful.
Much love.